The jungle was dying around them. 12 Navy SEALs, America's most elite warriors, pinned down in a kill zone that was rapidly becoming their tomb. Chief Petty Officer Brennan Cole pressed himself against the moss-covered log, trying to make his 6'2" frame invisible as bullets chewed through the vegetation above his head. The sound was constant now, a wall of noise that made thinking almost impossible. His radio crackled with desperation. "Viper 6, this is Ground Team Alpha. We need immediate air support. We need QRF. We need anything. We're getting massacred out here." The response was not what he wanted to hear. "Ground Team Alpha, no air assets available. Heavy weather. QRF is 40 minutes out. You need to hold your position." 40 minutes. They'd all be dead in 10. The mission had been textbook until it wasn't. Intelligence said the compound would have maybe 20 hostiles, light resistance, in and out before breakfast. But intelligence had been catastrophically wrong. The compound had been a trap, and now his team was surrounded by what looked like an entire battalion of well-trained, well-equipped fighters who knew exactly what they were doing. "Chief," his teammate Rodriguez shouted over the gunfire, "we got movement on the left flank. They're trying to surround us." Brennan did the math. 12 SEALs with dwindling ammunition against an enemy force that seemed to have unlimited numbers and firepower. The mathematics were simple and brutal. They were going to die here in this God-forsaken wilderness, thousands of miles from home, and nobody would even know how it happened. He keyed his radio one more time, his voice calm despite the chaos. "Viper 6, Ground Team Alpha, if you've got anything, anyone nearby, now would be a really good time." There was a long pause. Then a voice he'd never heard before came through his earpiece. Female, young, calm as ice water. "Ground Team Alpha, I have your position. I'm inbound. Tell your boys to keep their heads down. This is about to get interesting." "Who the hell is this?" "Someone who doesn't miss." Before Brennan could respond, the jungle erupted with a sound he'd heard countless times in combat, the distinctive crack of a precision rifle. But this wasn't random fire. This was surgical. One shot. The enemy machine gunner who'd been tearing apart their position crumpled silently. Another shot. The spotter next to him dropped. A third shot. The enemy commander coordinating the assault fell backward, a neat hole where his forehead used to be. "What the hell?" Rodriguez whispered. Brennan stared into the dense jungle, trying to locate the shooter. Whoever she was operating at a level he'd rarely seen. Each shot was finding a target his team couldn't even see, eliminating threats with a precision that seemed almost supernatural. "Ground Team Alpha," the voice came through again. "I count 25 hostiles in your engagement area. Give me 2 minutes. And whatever you do, don't shoot the person coming from your 6 o'clock. That's me." 25 hostiles. She was planning to drop 25 enemy fighters. Alone. 48 hours earlier, Eleanor Blackwood had been sitting in a briefing room at a classified location, listening to people who'd never been in combat tell her how to do her job. At 28, she'd learned that this was just part of the game. Let them talk. Let them think they were in charge. Then go do what actually needed to be done. "Your role is strictly reconnaissance and observation," the operations officer was saying, pointing at a map of the Tennessee mountain region. "You'll be inserted 12 clicks from the target compound. Set up an observation post, monitor enemy activity, report back. That's it. No direct action unless absolutely necessary for self-defense." Elle nodded politely, making appropriate notes, looking every bit the compliant contractor who would follow orders to the letter. Inside, she was already planning for the moment when those orders would become irrelevant, because she'd been doing this work long enough to know that reconnaissance missions in hostile territory rarely stayed reconnaissance missions. The wilderness didn't care about your operational parameters. Combat didn't respect your rules of engagement. And when things went wrong, all the careful planning in the world meant nothing compared to the person on the ground, making split-second decisions. Her official title was Military Intelligence Contractor, Field Analyst. Her actual job was significantly more complicated. Elle was what the intelligence community called a singleton operator, someone who worked alone, deep in denied territory, gathering intelligence that couldn't be obtained any other way. She spoke 4 languages fluently, could navigate by stars alone, and had survived in some of the world's most hostile environments, using nothing but her wits and training. But what made her truly exceptional, what made her valuable enough that certain people at certain agencies kept her on speed dial, was her ability with a rifle. Specifically, her ability to hit targets at ranges that most snipers considered impossible. The briefing ended with the usual warnings about rules of engagement, operational security, and the importance of following protocols. Elle smiled, shook hands, and returned to her quarters to prepare. Her gear was already packed. Custom-built rifle broken down into components that fit in an innocuous hiking backpack. Ammunition, match-grade rounds, each one hand-selected for consistency. Ghillie suit components that could be assembled from local vegetation. Water purification tablets, emergency medical kit, satellite phone with encryption, and a sidearm that she hoped she'd never need, but carried anyway. She studied the maps one more time, memorizing terrain features, identifying potential observation positions, planning primary and alternate routes. The insertion point was in dense, triple canopy forest, the kind of terrain where visibility dropped to meters and navigation became an exercise in dead reckoning and instinct. As she worked, her mind drifted to another briefing room, another mission, 6 weeks ago. The faces still haunted her. 17 confirmed kills to extract a CIA team from a compromised safehouse. She'd done everything right, everything by the book. Systematic elimination of threats, perfect shot placement, professional execution. The CIA team had survived, mission success, but one face wouldn't leave her. A boy, maybe 16, maybe 17, hard to tell through the scope. He'd been carrying an AK-47, wearing a tactical vest, positioned with the other fighters. A legitimate target by any definition of rules of engagement. But when she'd seen his body afterward, during the extraction, she'd noticed his hands. Soft, uncalloused, not the hands of a hardened fighter. The hands of a kid who'd been holding that rifle for maybe a week, maybe less. Forced recruitment, probably threatened family, probably had no choice. She'd killed him anyway. Because he was a threat, because he had a weapon, because her people needed her to eliminate anything that could harm them. The mission report called it a clean operation. 0 American casualties. Objective achieved. But Elle woke up screaming his name 3 nights a week. She didn't even know his real name. She'd invented one. Ahmed. Young. Scared. Dead. And she was the one who'd made him that way. The day you stop feeling is the day you become a weapon, not a warrior. Her grandfather's voice echoing across the years. William Blackwood had taught her to shoot when she was 11 years old, not because he wanted to create a killer, but because he wanted to teach her the cost of taking a life. He'd been a Marine sniper in Korea, Chosin Reservoir, 73 confirmed kills in that frozen hell. He'd come home with medals and nightmares in equal measure. She could still remember that first lesson, clear as yesterday. Wyoming, summer, 2007. The ranch spread out before her like something from a postcard. Mountains in the distance, pine trees close enough to smell, grass so green it almost hurt to look at. She was 11 years old, small for her age, all elbows and knees and nervous energy. Her grandfather handed her the rifle, a .22, small enough for her to handle, big enough to matter. Shooting is 10% technique, he said, his voice rough from decades of cigarettes and silence. 90% understanding the cost. He showed her how to hold it, how to breathe, how to find the sight picture, and let everything else fade away until there was just the target, the crosshairs, and the moment between heartbeats when the world stood still. There, he pointed to a deer grazing maybe 60 yards out. Young buck, antlers just starting to branch. That's your target. Take your time. Breathe. When you're ready, squeeze. Elle settled into position, found the deer in her sights, watched it graze, oblivious to the fact that its life was about to end. Her finger found the trigger. She squeezed. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. The deer dropped, and Elle started crying. Great, racking sobs that shook her whole body. She couldn't stop, couldn't breathe. All she could see was the deer falling, the way its legs had crumpled, the way it had been alive 1 second and gone the next. Her grandfather didn't comfort her, didn't tell her it was okay, didn't do any of the things she expected. Instead, he knelt beside her and waited until she could breathe again. "Good," he said finally. "Good?" She stared at him through tears. "I'm crying like a baby." "Good," he repeated. "The day you can take a life and not feel anything is the day you become dangerous. Not to the enemy, to yourself." He was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the mountains. "I stopped counting their faces in Korea," he said. "Started seeing them as targets instead of men. Made it easier to pull the trigger. Made it easier to sleep at night. For a while." He looked at her then, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Something broken. "But then one day I realized I couldn't remember what my own daughter looked like. Your mother. Couldn't picture her face. Because I trained myself not to see faces anymore. Just targets, just threats, just things to eliminate." He took the rifle from her hands. "I'm teaching you to shoot so you never become what I became. So you always remember that every time you pull that trigger, someone doesn't go home. Someone's father, someone's son, someone's brother. They might be the enemy, they might deserve it, but they're still human." He stood up, offered her his hand. "Come on, we've got work to do. That deer gave its life. We honor that by using every part of it, by remembering what it cost." Elle took his hand, and she never forgot that lesson. The helicopter insertion was scheduled for 0200 hours, low and fast, using terrain to mask their approach. No lights, relying on the pilot's night vision and skill to avoid detection. Elle had done this dozens of times, but it never got routine. Every insertion carried the risk of compromise, of enemy fire, of mechanical failure that would send them spiraling into the forest canopy. But this one went smoothly. The helicopter flared just long enough for her to jump into waist-high grass, then disappeared into the night, the sound of its rotors fading quickly into the ambient wilderness noise. She was alone. 12 kilometers from the target, in mountains that would deny she existed if she got caught. Perfect. Elle moved through the forest with practiced silence, using terrain and vegetation to mask her movement, stopping frequently to listen, to sense, to ensure she wasn't walking into an ambush. The wilderness at night was alive with sound. Insects, animals, the rustle of wind through leaves. Learning to distinguish natural sounds from human-made ones was a skill that took years to develop and seconds to lose if you got complacent. It took her 6 hours to cover the 12 kilometers to her planned observation post. Slow, careful movement, avoiding trails, avoiding areas where humans might be, staying in the densest vegetation where her presence would be harder to detect. Halfway there, crossing a stream, she slipped. The rock was slick with moss, invisible in the darkness. Her foot went out from under her, and she went down hard, twisting her ankle on the stream bed. Pain shot up her leg, sharp and immediate. Elle bit down on her lip to keep from making noise. Sat in the cold water for 30 seconds, breathing through the pain, assessing the damage. Sprained, not broken. She could still walk, but it was going to hurt. She pulled herself onto the bank, emptied water from her boots, and wrapped the ankle with an elastic bandage from her medical kit. No medic out here, no backup, no extraction if she couldn't walk. Just her and the mission and the pain. She kept moving. The observation post was exactly where the map said it would be. A ridgeline overlooking the valley, perfect sightlines, natural cover, multiple escape routes. She assembled her rifle with practiced efficiency, constructed a hide using local vegetation, and settled in to watch. The compound below was more active than intelligence had suggested. Through her scope, Elle started counting. 10 hostiles. 20. 30. She kept counting. 45. Her stomach tightened. Intelligence had said maybe 20 fighters, light resistance, poorly trained militia. What she was seeing was 3 times that number, and they weren't moving like militia. They were conducting patrols with professional precision, maintaining tactical spacing, using hand signals. These were trained soldiers. She pulled out the encrypted satellite phone and called it in. Command, this is Overwatch. Be advised, enemy force strength significantly higher than intelligence estimated. I count 45 plus hostiles. Repeat, 45 plus. And they're operating with military-grade discipline. There was a pause on the other end. Overwatch command, confirm count. 45 hostiles? Confirmed. And they have military-grade weapons, AKS, RPGs, what looks like a 50 cal position on the north perimeter. This is not light resistance. Another pause, longer this time. Overwatch. Intelligence assessment stands. Continue observation. Do not, repeat, do not engage unless in immediate danger. The SEAL mission is still greenlit. Acknowledge. Elle felt the first stirring of unease. Something was wrong here. The intelligence didn't match reality. The enemy was far stronger than anticipated. The SEALs were walking into a situation that could go bad very quickly. But she wasn't in command. She was just the observer. She'd done her job by reporting. What happened next was someone else's decision. Acknowledge command. Continuing observation. Overwatch out. She settled deeper into her hide and watched, and tried to ignore the feeling that she was watching a disaster unfold in slow motion. The SEAL team insertion happened the following night. Elle watched through her scope as the helicopters came in fast and low, dropping the 12-man team at the edge of the forest before disappearing back into the darkness. She could track their movement through the dense vegetation, their infrared signatures visible through her thermal scope, moving with the confident precision of operators who'd done this 1,000 times. The assault on the compound was textbook. Breaching charges blowing doors, flashbangs disorienting defenders, controlled pairs of gunfire taking down targets. The SEALs were doing everything right, moving with the kind of deadly efficiency that came from years of training and combat experience. Elle watched it unfold with professional appreciation, and then the trap sprung. Hidden positions around the compound opened fire simultaneously. Machine guns, rifles, RPGs. The compound had been bait, and the SEALs had taken it. Now enemy forces were pouring in from multiple directions, trying to surround and destroy the American team. Elle's radio erupted with traffic. Contact left, contact right, they're everywhere. This isn't simunition, these are live rounds, we have wounded. Viper 6, this is Ground Team Alpha. We are taking heavy casualties. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. We need immediate extract. Through her scope, Elle watched the SEALs fighting their way out, moving with desperate speed toward a defensible position. They were good, incredibly good, but they were outnumbered by at least 5 to 1, maybe more. Enemy fighters kept appearing from the forest, an endless stream of armed men moving to encircle the SEAL team. She heard the radio traffic, the desperate calls for support, the grim acknowledgement that help was too far away. This was the moment when she was supposed to stay hidden, maintain her position, preserve her cover. She was reconnaissance, not direct action. Getting involved would compromise her mission and potentially her life. Elle made her decision in about 3 seconds. Her grandfather's voice in her memory. A weapon follows orders. A warrior protects. The face of that teenage boy she killed 6 weeks ago. Young, scared, dead because she hadn't been able to save him from the circumstances that forced him to fight. 12 Americans down there, 12 men fighting for their lives against impossible odds. She thought about following orders, staying hidden, watching them die. She thought about breaking protocol, exposing her position, saving their lives. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. "Fuck protocol," she muttered, settling deeper into her firing position. Elle had been calculating ranges since the assault started, identifying priority targets, planning her engagement sequence. The SEALs were roughly 800 meters away, taking cover in a small depression ringed by fallen logs. Enemy forces were closing from 3 directions, using fire and maneuver tactics that showed sophisticated training. Her first target was the machine gun team on the left flank. They were pouring fire into the SEAL position, keeping the Americans pinned down while other fighters moved to flank. She could see the gunner and his assistant through her scope, both partially concealed behind a fallen tree. Elle controlled her breathing, letting her heart rate slow, feeling the wind on her face, calculating the correction needed for distance and wind drift. The forest was humid, which would affect bullet trajectory. The slight breeze was moving right to left. She needed to aim high and left to compensate. Distance, 820 meters. Wind, 3 miles per hour, left to right. Temperature, dropping with evening. Humidity, high. She made the mental calculations in fractions of a second. Adjustments so practiced they were instinct now. Through the scope, she could see his face. Young, maybe 23. Somebody's son, somebody's brother. "I see you," she whispered. She exhaled slowly and pressed the trigger. The rifle recoiled against her shoulder with familiar force. Through the scope, she saw the machine gunner's head snap back, his body going limp. The assistant gunner froze for a critical second, trying to understand what had happened. That second was his last. Elle's second shot dropped him before he could react. She keyed her radio. "Ground Team Alpha, I have your position. I'm engaging. Keep your heads down." The response was immediate. Confusion, disbelief, but also hope. "Who is this? What's your call sign?" "Just call me Overwatch, and get ready. This is about to get interesting." Elle transitioned to her next target, an enemy squad leader coordinating the assault on the right flank. He was using hand signals to direct his men, positioning them for a final push that would overrun the SEAL position. She could see him clearly through her scope. Older, maybe late 40s, graying beard, giving orders with the confidence of someone who'd done this before. "Grandfather," she whispered, "help me stay human through this." She put a round through his chest. He fell, and his squad's coordination immediately deteriorated. The enemy forces, confused by fighters dropping with no apparent cause, began to hesitate. Their advance stalled as squad leaders tried to figure out where the fire was coming from. In that moment of confusion, the SEALs began returning fire with renewed aggression, taking advantage of the enemy's disorganization. Elle worked methodically through her target list. Enemy commanders first, the men giving orders, coordinating movement. Each one she dropped created chaos in the enemy ranks, disrupted their tactical cohesion, bought the SEALs precious seconds. Then heavy weapons operators, machine gunners, RPG teams, anyone who could inflict mass casualties. Then exposed infantry who posed immediate threats to the SEAL position. Each shot was deliberate. Each shot accounted for wind, distance, humidity, the angle of the slope, the movement of the target. This wasn't spray and pray. This was precision shooting at the highest level. Each trigger press, the culmination of dozens of calculations and adjustments, performed in fractions of seconds. Her fourth target was an RPG gunner preparing to fire into the SEAL position. She shot him as he lifted the weapon to his shoulder. The rocket detonated in place, taking out the gunner and 2 nearby fighters in a ball of fire and shrapnel. Fifth target, a spotter directing mortar fire. He was using a radio, calling in coordinates that would drop high explosives directly onto the Americans. Through her scope, Elle saw something fall from his pocket as he moved. A photograph. Even at this distance, she could see it was a picture of a woman holding a small child. His wife. His daughter. "I'm sorry," Elle whispered. "I'm so sorry." Her round entered just below his ear. The mortars fell silent. She was operating in a zone of absolute focus now, a state where time seemed to slow and every detail became crystal clear. The humid forest air, the weight of the rifle, the slight tremor in the vegetation that indicated wind direction, the thermal signatures of enemy fighters moving through the dense foliage. 6th through 10th targets fell in rapid succession. An enemy sniper who'd been trying to locate her position, a squad leader rallying his men for another assault, 3 fighters setting up a flanking position that would have given them a clear shot at the SEALs. By her 11th shot, Elle's shoulder was aching from the rifle's recoil. The bruising was starting to set in, deep purple spreading across her collarbone. Her right eye was tearing from the strain of staring through the scope for so long. But her hands remained steady, her breathing controlled, her focus absolute. The enemy was in complete disarray now. They'd figured out roughly where the fire was coming from, but roughly wasn't good enough. Elle was 800 meters away, concealed in dense forest, firing from a position that gave her clear sight lines while keeping her nearly invisible. Enemy fighters began shooting wildly in her general direction, but their fire was uncoordinated and inaccurate. They were panicking, which was exactly what she wanted. Panicked soldiers made mistakes, exposed themselves, forgot their training. She continued her methodical elimination. Target 12. A fighter with a radio who was probably calling for reinforcements. Target 13. Another machine gunner trying to suppress the SEAL position. Target 14. A squad attempting to use smoke grenades to mask their approach. The SEALs, understanding they had a guardian angel, began maneuvering more aggressively. They were laying down suppressive fire, using the enemy's confusion to improve their position, evacuating their wounded. Elle could hear the relief in their radio traffic, the grim determination replacing earlier desperation. But the fight wasn't over. Enemy reinforcements were arriving, fresh fighters moving in from the main compound. Elle counted at least 15 more hostiles entering the engagement area, some of them wearing tactical vests and carrying weapons that suggested professional military training. "Ground Team Alpha," she transmitted. "New hostiles inbound from your 3 o'clock. Squad-sized element with possible heavy weapons. Engaging now." She shifted her aim to the approaching reinforcements. These fighters were being more cautious, using cover effectively, advancing with tactical discipline. But caution only went so far against a shooter they couldn't see or locate. Target 15 dropped while trying to cross an open area. Target 16 fell while directing his squad from behind a tree. 17 and 18 went down in quick succession as they exposed themselves to set up a machine gun. Elle was burning through ammunition now, each shot dropping another enemy fighter, each trigger press removing another threat to the SEAL team. Her shoulders screamed from the rifle's recoil, her eyes strained from hours of staring through the scope. But her hands remained steady, her breathing controlled, her focus absolute. Target 19 was attempting to flank the SEAL position from an unexpected angle, moving alone through dense vegetation. Elle tracked him through thermal imaging, waiting until he paused to check his position. One shot. He crumpled silently into the undergrowth. Target 20 tried to rally the remaining fighters, shouting orders, trying to restore some tactical coherence to the disintegrating assault. Elle's round silenced him mid-sentence. The enemy's will was breaking. She could see it in how they moved. Less aggressive, more defensive, looking for ways to retreat rather than advance. The trap they had set for the SEALs had become their own kill zone, dominated by an invisible shooter who seemed to anticipate their every move. Targets 21 through 23 fell as they attempted to provide covering fire for a retreat. Target 24 went down while trying to recover his dead commander's radio. Target 25, the last immediate threat to the SEAL team, dropped while attempting to maneuver into a position that would have allowed him to engage the Americans. And then, suddenly, it was over. The surviving enemy fighters were fleeing, abandoning their weapons, disappearing into the forest. The sustained gunfire that had been constant for the past 8 minutes fell silent, replaced by the normal sounds of the wilderness. Insects, birds, the rustle of wind through leaves. Elle remained in position, scanning for threats, ensuring the enemy wasn't regrouping for another assault. But her thermal scope showed fighters streaming away from the engagement area, their retreat chaotic and disorganized. They'd had enough. "Ground Team Alpha," she transmitted. "Hostiles are retreating. Your area is secure. I'm coming to you. Don't shoot me." She could hear the exhaustion and relief in the response. "Copy that, Overwatch. We see you on thermals. Come ahead. And ma'am, I don't know who the hell you are, but you just saved 12 lives today." Elle broke down her hide, carefully collecting her brass. Leaving evidence behind was unprofessional. She began moving toward the SEAL position, making noise to announce her presence, keeping her rifle pointed at the ground in a non-threatening manner. Her twisted ankle throbbed with each step, the pain radiating up her leg. She'd almost forgotten about it during the engagement, adrenaline masking the injury. Now it reminded her with every footfall. The last thing she needed was to survive the battle, only to get shot by friendly fire. She emerged from the forest into the SEAL position to find 12 of America's most elite warriors staring at her like she just materialized from thin air. Which, from their perspective, she basically had. Chief Petty Officer Brennan Cole was a big man. 6 feet 2 inches of solid muscle, Viking beard, tactical gear that made him look like he'd stepped out of a medieval war saga. He studied Elle with professional interest, taking in her compact 5'6" frame, the custom rifle slung across her back, the ghillie suit components still attached to her gear. "You're the shooter?" he asked, his tone suggesting he was still processing what had just happened. "I'm the shooter," Elle confirmed. "How many did you drop?" 25 confirmed, maybe more with the ones behind cover. Hard to tell in this terrain. One of the other SEALs, a younger operator with corporal stripes and a name tape that read Martinez, shook his head in disbelief. "Ma'am, I've been shooting my whole adult life. I'm a designated marksman. And what you just did, that was, I don't even know what to call it. That was superhuman." "Just training and practice," Elle said, "and good timing. You guys were about to have a really bad day." "We were about to have our last day," Brennan corrected. "If you hadn't shown up when you did, we'd be calling for body bags instead of extract." He extended his hand. "Chief Petty Officer Brennan Cole." Elle shook his hand, noting the strength in his grip and the genuine gratitude in his eyes. "Eleanor Blackwood, military intelligence contractor." "Contractor?" another SEAL repeated, his tone skeptical. "What kind of contractor operates alone in hostile territory and shoots like a Delta Force sniper?" "The kind that gets hired for situations like this," Elle replied evenly. She wasn't offended by the skepticism. She dealt with it her entire career. The assumption that because she was young and female, she couldn't possibly be as skilled as her record suggested. She'd learned to let her work speak for itself. Rodriguez, the SEAL who'd been calling out enemy positions during the fight, approached with fresh respect in his eyes. "Ma'am, I've worked with some of the best snipers in the military. What you just did, engaging multiple targets at that range, in these conditions, under stress, that's world class." "Where'd you train?" "Here and there," Elle said vaguely. The truth was that her training came from multiple sources: military schools, private instruction from retired special operations snipers, thousands of hours of self-practice, and real-world experience in places that never appeared in official records. But that wasn't information she shared casually. "Right now, we should focus on getting you guys extracted. This area is going to get hot when the enemy regroups and calls for backup." Brennan nodded, already keying his radio. "Viper 6, Ground Team Alpha, hostile contact broken. We're secure for extract." We also have an additional friendly, one contractor who just saved our asses. We'll need one more seat on the bird. The response came back quickly. Ground Team Alpha, understand additional passenger. Extract birds are inbound. ETA 12 minutes. Move to primary LZ. Roger, moving now. Brennan looked at his team. You heard the man. Let's move. Johnson, Ramirez, carry the wounded. Everyone else, tactical spacing. Watch our flanks. Miss Blackwood, you're with me. I want you where I can see you. Not because I don't trust you, but because I don't want to accidentally leave behind the person who just saved our lives. The SEAL team moved through the forest with professional efficiency. Despite their exhaustion and wounds, 2 men were being carried, both conscious but unable to walk. The rest maintained security, scanning for threats, ready to engage if the enemy returned. Elle moved with them, her rifle ready, her eyes constantly scanning. The fight was over, but they weren't safe yet. Plenty of operations had gone wrong in the final moments when exhaustion and relief made people careless. Her ankle protested every step. The elastic bandage helped, but the joint was swelling inside her boot. She pushed through it, maintaining pace with the SEALs, refusing to show weakness. Pain was just information. The mission wasn't complete until everyone was on the helicopter. The landing zone was a small clearing, barely large enough for helicopters. The SEALs spread out in a defensive perimeter, watching the forest for any sign of pursuit. Elle took a position that gave her overlapping fire with the team's automatic weapons. If the enemy attacked during extract, she wanted to be able to support the defensive fire. Contact left, one of the SEALs shouted. Elle's rifle was up and tracking before she'd consciously processed the warning. Through her scope, she saw 3 enemy fighters emerging from the forest. Apparently, survivors from the earlier battle who decided to make one last attempt at revenge. Her first shot dropped the lead fighter before he could raise his weapon. The second fighter managed to get off a burst of automatic fire, none of which came close to hitting anything, before Elle's second shot ended him. The third fighter dove for cover, but Elle had already calculated where he'd land. Her third shot found him as he tried to scramble behind a fallen log. Clear, she called out calmly. The SEALs stared at her. Again, Rodriguez muttered. Does she ever miss? Not that I've seen, Brennan replied, and I'm starting to think we need to rethink our definition of contractor. The helicopters arrived moments later, 2 Blackhawks coming in fast and low, their door gunners scanning for threats. The extract was textbook. SEALs loading quickly but carefully, ensuring the wounded were secure, doing accountability to make sure no one was left behind. Elle was last on board, taking a seat near the door where she could provide covering fire if needed. As the helicopter lifted off, banking away from the forest and accelerating towards safety, she finally allowed herself to relax slightly. Not completely. She never relaxed completely in a combat zone, but enough to acknowledge that the immediate danger had passed. Her hands were shaking now, the adrenaline crash hitting hard. 25 confirmed kills in less than 10 minutes of sustained engagement. She could see their faces when she closed her eyes. The young machine gunner, the spotter with the family photo, the squad leader with the graying beard. 25 men who'd woken up this morning with no idea it would be their last day alive. 25 fathers, brothers, sons who weren't going home. She'd seen each one through her scope, forced herself to see them as human, not just targets. That was her grandfather's lesson. That was what kept her from becoming numb. But right now the cost felt almost unbearable. Brennan sat across from her, studying her with an expression that mixed gratitude with professional curiosity. Over the headset, his voice came through clearly despite the helicopter noise. Miss Blackwood, when we get back, there are going to be a lot of people who want to talk to you. Debriefs, after-action reports, probably some medals and commendations. I'd prefer to avoid all of that if possible, Elle replied. I work better when people don't know who I am or what I do. I get that, but you just saved 12 SEALs. That's not something that goes unnoticed. Then let's compromise. I'll do the debrief for operational purposes, but keep my name out of official reports. Attribute the support to local assets or intelligence contractor, or whatever vague term works. I'm more effective when I'm not famous. Brennan considered this. I can probably make that happen, but my team knows who you are, and they're going to tell this story. Maybe not with your name attached, but they're going to tell it. Because what you did today, that's the kind of thing that becomes a legend. The mysterious sniper who appeared out of nowhere and single-handedly turned a massacre into a rescue. Elle looked out the helicopter door at the forest disappearing below them. Somewhere down there, enemy fighters were regrouping, reporting what happened, trying to understand how their perfect ambush had turned into a disaster. Let them wonder. Mystery was one of her most effective weapons. The debriefing took place in a secure facility that officially didn't exist, hidden deep in the mountains on what the maps called disputed territory, but what everyone knew was a covert operations base. Elle sat across from Colonel Sterling Graves, a career intelligence officer with 20 years of experience in special operations. Brennan sat to her right, still in his combat gear, refusing to leave until he'd personally ensured Elle received proper recognition for what she'd done. Miss Blackwood, the colonel began, reviewing the preliminary reports on his tablet. I've been reading Chief Cole's account of today's engagement. The numbers are, frankly, they're hard to believe. 25 confirmed enemy kills from a single shooter at ranges exceeding 800 meters in forest conditions, while the targets were actively engaged in combat operations. That's accurate, sir, Elle confirmed. I've been in this business a long time, Miss Blackwood. I've worked with some of the best snipers the military has ever produced. What you're describing, what Chief Cole is describing, represents a level of marksmanship that approaches the theoretical maximum of what's humanly possible. I had good conditions, sir. Clear sight lines from my position, thermal optics to identify targets through vegetation, and the enemy was focused on the SEAL team, not looking for a threat from my position. Those factors combined to create an ideal engagement scenario. Ideal for you, perhaps, catastrophic for the enemy. The colonel leaned back in his chair. I need to understand your background, Miss Blackwood. Your file says you're a contractor with intelligence analysis specializations. But what I'm seeing in these reports suggests capabilities more consistent with Tier 1 special operations personnel. Before Elle could respond, alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. Red emergency lights began strobing in the corridors, casting everything in an eerie crimson glow. The colonel's radio erupted with urgent traffic. Sir, we have a situation. Enemy assault force approaching from multiple vectors. Estimated force strength between 50 and 60 hostiles. They're heavily armed and moving with tactical coordination. Distance to perimeter, 800 meters in closing. Elle saw the color drain from Colonel Graves' face. This facility was supposed to be secret, secured by its remote location and careful operational security. An enemy assault here would be catastrophic, not just for the personnel present, but for the intelligence compromise it represented. Maps, communications equipment, personnel rosters, everything that would reveal the extent of American operations in this region. Lock down the facility, Graves ordered, his voice steady despite the crisis. Get everyone armed and in defensive positions. Call for QRF support. Sir, QRF is 25 minutes out minimum. Weather's deteriorating. We might not get air support at all. The colonel looked at his tactical display, watching the red icons representing enemy forces converging on the facility from 3 different directions. How many combat-capable personnel do we have on site? 15, sir, but only 5 have recent combat experience. The rest are support staff, intel analysts, communication specialists, medical personnel. Against 60 trained fighters, Brennan said grimly, already checking his weapon. My team's here, but we're down to maybe 60% combat effectiveness. We're wounded, exhausted, and low on ammunition. Elle was already standing, her mind shifting from debrief mode to combat operations. She moved to the facility's tactical display, studying the terrain, the approach vectors, the defensive positions. Colonel, I need detailed topography of the area surrounding this facility. Elevation data, vegetation density, natural choke points. Miss Blackwood, you're a civilian contractor who has capabilities you clearly need right now, Elle interrupted. Sir, with respect, we don't have time for protocol discussions. That enemy force will be in assault range in 10 minutes. We need to set up a defense, and we need to do it now. Graves hesitated only a moment, then nodded. Show her everything. Miss Blackwood, what do you need? Elle studied the tactical display, her fingers tracing potential firing positions, calculating ranges and angles. The facility was built into a hillside, surrounded by dense forest on 3 sides, with a cleared approach on the 4th. Natural choke points where the forest thinned. High ground positions that would provide clear sight lines. I need to get outside the perimeter, she said. Set up in an elevated position with clear sight lines to the enemy approach vectors. Same tactics as before. I'll engage at long range, disrupt their assault coordination, eliminate high-value targets, buy time for your QRF to arrive. That's a suicide mission, one of the other officers protested. You'll be completely exposed, behind enemy lines, with no support and no extraction plan. I'll be 900 to 1,000 meters from their assault positions, Elle corrected. Concealed in forest terrain that I've already scouted, engaging targets from a position they can't easily locate or effectively return fire on. It's not suicide, it's asymmetric warfare. Brennan spoke up. Colonel, I've seen what she can do. If she says she can hold off that assault force, I believe her. My team will hold the facility perimeter. We'll create a defensive kill zone at the cleared approaches. She picks off their leadership and heavy weapons. We handle anyone who makes it through. It's not a great plan, but it's better than getting overrun. The colonel looked at Elle for a long moment, weighing impossible options. Finally, he nodded. Do it. But Miss Blackwood, if the situation becomes untenable, you extract immediately. We can't afford to lose someone with your capabilities over a facility that can be rebuilt. Understood, sir. Elle grabbed extra ammunition, checked her gear, and headed for the exit. As she moved past Brennan, he caught her arm. Hey, he said quietly, you don't owe us this. You already saved us once today. Nobody would blame you for sitting this one out. Elle met his eyes. There are people in this facility who can't defend themselves. Support staff who never signed up for a firefight. Analysts, medical personnel. They need someone to keep them safe. That's reason enough. You always work alone like this? It's safer for everyone. Safer for them or for you? Elle paused. The question hit closer than she wanted to admit. When you work alone, you can't lose anyone. Brennan studied her face. But you can lose yourself. Your grandfather teach you that? Elle stared at him, startled. How did you? Because I see it in your eyes. You're carrying weight. You're afraid of becoming numb to it. But that fear? That means you haven't lost yourself yet. Remember that out there. Elle slipped out through a camouflaged side entrance, moving quickly but carefully through the forest. Behind her, she could hear the SEALs organizing the defense, their voices calm and professional despite the desperate situation. These men had already survived one impossible battle today. Now they were preparing for another. Her ankle screamed with each step, the swelling worse now, the joint feeling loose and unstable. She gritted her teeth and kept moving. There'd be time to deal with injuries later. Right now, people needed her. Elle reached her planned position in less than 5 minutes. A rocky outcrop on a hillside about 920 meters from the facility, elevated 25 meters above the valley floor. The position offered excellent sight lines down into the approaches while providing natural cover from return fire. She constructed a hasty hide using available vegetation, settled into a stable firing position, and began scanning through her scope. The enemy force was larger than initial reports suggested. Through her thermal optics, she counted at least 55 fighters, organized into squad-sized elements of 8 to 10 men each, moving with tactical discipline that suggested professional military training. They were using fire and maneuver tactics, maintaining intervals, communicating with hand signals. This wasn't a mob. This was a coordinated military assault. She keyed her radio. "Command, this is Overwatch. I'm in position. I count 55 enemy fighters organized in 5 assault squads, plus a command element. They're 350 meters from your perimeter and closing. I'm beginning engagement." "Roger, Overwatch," the colonel responded. "You are cleared hot. Watch your fire. Some of our people might be in forward positions." Elle identified her first priority target, the overall assault commander, distinguishable by his position behind the main force, and the cluster of radio men and officers around him. He was gesturing, giving orders, coordinating the multi-directional assault. Taking him out would disrupt their command and control. She calculated the shot. 940 meters. Slight crosswind from the east, high humidity, temperature dropping as the sun set behind the mountains. She adjusted for all variables, let her breathing settle, and squeezed the trigger. The commander dropped instantly, his officers scattering in confusion. Elle didn't give them time to reorganize. Her second shot took down the nearest officer who tried to take command. Her third eliminated a radio man who was probably calling for instructions. The enemy assault faltered immediately. Squad leaders looked back toward their command element, seeking guidance that was no longer there. In that moment of confusion, Elle shifted her aim to the leading assault elements. Target 4 was a heavy machine gunner setting up to provide suppressive fire. Target 5 was his ammunition bearer. Both dropped within seconds of each other. Target 6 was a squad leader directing his men into assault positions. Through her scope, Elle could see his face clearly. Late 40s, graying beard, weather-worn features. Someone who'd been doing this for a long time. "Grandfather," she whispered, "help me remember them. Help me stay human." She pressed the trigger. Target 7 was an RPG gunner preparing to fire at the facility. Elle shot him as he lifted the tube, and the rocket detonated prematurely, the explosion taking out 2 more fighters nearby. Target 8 was a sniper who'd taken position to provide overwatch. He'd been scanning the wrong direction, looking for threats from the facility instead of from Elle's position. He never saw her shot coming. By her 10th shot, the enemy assault had completely stalled. Fighters were taking cover, unsure where the fire was coming from, watching their leaders and heavy weapons specialists drop without warning. Some were returning fire, but they were shooting blindly into the forest, wasting ammunition on empty terrain. Elle kept working. Target 11 was another squad leader attempting to rally his men. Target 12 was a fighter with a radio, probably trying to call the main force for instructions or reinforcements. Targets 13 and 14 were attempting to flank the facility using a ravine for concealment. Elle tracked them through thermal imaging, patient as death itself, waiting until they emerged from the ravine. Both fell before they could take 3 steps in the open. Overwatch command, enemy assault has stopped advancing. They're taking defensive positions approximately 200 meters from our perimeter. Whatever you're doing, it's working. Roger, command. I'm shifting fire to suppress any attempt to reorganize. Stand by. Elle identified the fighters who were trying to establish a new command structure. She could see them gathering in small groups, leaders attempting to restore order, to coordinate a new assault plan. She systematically eliminated anyone who appeared to be giving orders, anyone who was coordinating movement, anyone who was trying to organize the chaos back into a coherent attack. Her shoulder was screaming now, a deep purple bruise spreading across her collarbone from the rifle's recoil. 15 shots in rapid succession, and she could feel each one like a fresh wound. But her hands remained steady. Target 15 was a senior fighter, probably a lieutenant or captain, who'd moved forward to take command. Target 16 was a fighter setting up a heavy machine gun on a tripod. Target 17 was another RPG gunner. Target 18 was a sniper who'd finally figured out roughly where Elle's position was and was attempting to locate her for a countershot. Elle saw him scanning her general area, saw the moment his scope swept past her hide. She adjusted her aim, calculated the wind, and fired. He dropped before he could find her, but his last shot had been close. Too close. Rounds began impacting around her position. The enemy couldn't see her exactly, but they knew her general location now. Dirt and rock fragments showered down as bullets tore through the vegetation near her hide. Elle had to move. She grabbed her rifle and crawled backward, dragging herself through the undergrowth, keeping low as rounds zipped overhead. Her ankle gave out completely, pain exploding up her leg. She gasped but kept moving. A branch caught her scope, and she heard the sickening crack of breaking glass. She examined the damage quickly. The primary scope's lens was cracked, a spider web of fractures radiating from the center. The electronics were flickering, the thermal imaging cutting in and out. Damn it! She switched to her backup scope, mounted on offset rings. No thermal imaging, no fancy electronics, just basic magnification in a simple reticle. The old-fashioned way, the way her grandfather had taught her. She found a new position 30 meters to the left, constructed a hasty hide, and resumed engagement. Target 19. A fighter attempting to establish a defensive perimeter. The shot felt different through the backup scope, the sight picture less precise, the range estimation more intuitive. But Elle had been shooting long before she had thermal optics and electronic rangefinders. Sometimes the old ways were the best ways. The fighter dropped. Target 20 was an enemy squad attempting to use smoke grenades to mask their approach. Without thermal imaging, Elle couldn't see through the smoke clearly, but she could see muzzle flashes when they fired, could track their movement by the disturbance in the smoke. She aimed at the flashes and pressed the trigger. When the smoke cleared, 3 bodies lay visible. Overwatch Command. We have new contacts. Second enemy force approaching from the east. Estimate 20 fighters moving to flank our position. Elle swung her rifle to cover the new threat vector. Through her backup scope, she could see a fresh squad of fighters attempting to use the confusion of the main assault to approach from an unexpected direction. Smart tactics. If they reached the facility's flank, they'd have clear shots at the defenders. She couldn't allow that. Target 21 was the squad leader of this flanking element. Target 22 was his second in command. Targets 23 through 25 were fighters carrying heavy weapons, a machine gun, an RPG, and what looked like a demolition charge. All 4 went down in rapid succession. The flanking element broke immediately. Without leadership or heavy weapons, the surviving fighters scattered into the forest, their assault abandoned. Elle shifted back to the primary assault force. They were attempting to withdraw now, dragging wounded and dead with them, providing covering fire as they retreated back into the forest. But Elle wasn't done yet. Target 26 was a fighter, setting up to provide covering fire for the retreat. And then Elle saw him, the man coordinating the entire withdrawal. Older, maybe 60, gray hair, commanding presence even in retreat. He was using a radio, calling orders, managing the chaos with professional calm. Through her scope, even with the backup optics, Elle recognized him. She'd seen his photo in intelligence briefings. Former U.S. Army colonel, disgraced, dishonorably discharged 3 years ago. Richard Vance, an American, a former soldier, someone who'd once worn the same uniform as the men she was protecting. Elle's finger hesitated on the trigger. He was the enemy. He'd betrayed his country. He'd led this assault. He was responsible for the deaths of American service members. But he was still American. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory. Country isn't a flag, Elle. It's the people you protect. She thought about the 12 SEALs she'd saved, the support staff in the facility who'd never signed up for combat, the intelligence officers and communication specialists whose only crime was serving their country. She thought about Brennan's words about staying human, about how her fear of numbness meant she still had her soul intact. Richard Vance had made his choice. He'd chosen betrayal over honor. He'd chosen to put American lives at risk. Elle steadied her breathing, calculated the shot. 995 meters. Wind shifting. Light fading with approaching dusk. The longest, hardest shot of the day. "I'm sorry you made this choice," she whispered, "but I won't let you hurt my people." She exhaled and pressed the trigger. Colonel Richard Vance fell, and the enemy assault collapsed completely. The remaining enemy fighters scattered like leaves in a storm. Without Vance's leadership, without their command structure, without their heavy weapons teams, the assault force disintegrated into panicked individuals seeking only to escape. Elle maintained her position, scanning through her backup scope. Her training screamed at her to keep firing, to eliminate every threat while they were vulnerable and exposed. But something her grandfather had taught her stayed her hand. There's killing to protect, and there's killing for its own sake. Know the difference. These men were no longer a threat. They were beaten, broken, running for their lives. Shooting them now wouldn't protect anyone. It would just add to the body count. 27 confirmed kills in less than 15 minutes. 27 more faces to carry. Elle keyed her radio, her voice steady despite the exhaustion washing over her. "Command, Overwatch. Enemy forces are withdrawing. Repeat, hostiles are breaking contact and retreating. Assess approximately 30 enemy KIA. Unknown number wounded. The assault has failed." Colonel Graves' voice came back, thick with emotion. "Overwatch command. Enemy has withdrawn. QRF is inbound. ETA 8 minutes. Maintain position until they arrive. And Miss Blackwood, I don't know what we did to deserve having you here today, but thank you. You just saved this entire facility." Elle stayed in her hide, watching and waiting. Her shoulder was a mass of purple bruising now, the pain so intense it made her eyes water. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably, the adrenaline crash hitting like a freight train. Her right eye was bloodshot from hours of staring through scopes, and her twisted ankle throbbed with each heartbeat. But she remained alert, scanning the forest, ready to engage if the enemy regrouped. They didn't. 20 minutes later, she heard the distinctive sound of incoming helicopters. The QRF arriving with heavily armed soldiers ready for a major engagement. They found only bodies, a secure facility, and one very tired contractor sitting on a hillside, methodically cleaning her rifle with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. Colonel Graves personally walked out to Elle's position, accompanied by Brennan and several other officers. His expression was a mixture of awe, gratitude, and complete bewilderment. "Miss Blackwood," he said, approaching slowly with his hands visible, "I've just reviewed the preliminary casualty assessment. 27 confirmed enemy kills from a single shooter in less than 15 minutes of engagement against a coordinated assault force that should have overrun this facility." Elle looked up from her rifle, her face pale with exhaustion. 27, sir. I counted. This is beyond anything I've seen in 20 years of special operations. What you've done today, first saving Chief Cole's team, now saving this entire facility, it's extraordinary." "Just doing my job, sir." "No," Brennan interjected, kneeling beside her. "No, ma'am, this is not just doing your job. I've worked with the best shooters in the SEAL teams, with special operations snipers who've spent their entire careers perfecting this craft. And none of them could have done what you did today. Not once, and certainly not twice in the same day." Rodriguez, who'd been examining the enemy casualties, approached with spent brass casings in his hand. "Ma'am, I've been tracking your shots based on the entry wounds and angles. You were engaging targets at ranges from 800 to over 1,000 meters in forest terrain, with limited visibility while they were moving and taking cover. The level of precision required to do that, it's honestly hard to believe even though I'm looking at the evidence." Elle stood slowly, wincing as her twisted ankle took her weight. She looked at the 3 spent casings in Rodriguez's hand, then out at the forest where 27 men had died because she'd pulled a trigger. The conditions were what they were, she said quietly. Good elevation, enemies who weren't aware of my position until too late. Good equipment, good training, and desperation on my side. Ma'am, another SEAL said, then caught himself. With respect, I'm a designated marksman. I train on this constantly. What you're calling standard conditions would be considered extremely challenging shots by any measure. You're making world record level marksmanship sound routine. Colonel Graves gestured back toward the facility. Miss Blackwood, we need to complete your debriefing. And this time I need your complete background. I need to understand how someone develops the capabilities you've displayed, because what I'm seeing doesn't match any training profile I'm familiar with. They returned to the command center, where Elle spent the next 3 hours walking through both engagements in detail. Her training background, competition shooting from age 8, mentorship from her grandfather, a Korean War Marine sniper, specialized instruction from private contractors, years of operational experience in denied territories. Her methods, extensive preparation, custom equipment, understanding of ballistics and environmental factors, thousands upon thousands of practice hours. But mostly, she talked about her grandfather's philosophy, about seeing targets as human beings, about understanding the cost of every shot, about the difference between being a weapon and being a warrior. So you're essentially self-taught, Colonel Graves said when she finished. No formal military sniper school. I've attended several military schools as a contractor, Elle replied, but most of my skill development came from private instruction and self-directed practice. I had the advantage of learning from multiple sources and synthesizing those different approaches into my own methodology. And your operational experience? Your file lists you as an intelligence analyst. That's my primary function, sir. But intelligence work in denied territories often requires defensive capabilities. I developed those capabilities so I could operate independently in high-risk environments. Brennan spoke up. Colonel, with respect, does it matter where she learned? She saved 23 American service members in the last 12 hours. Those are results that speak for themselves. It matters, Graves replied, because I need to understand if her capabilities can be replicated. If we can train other operators to this level, or if Miss Blackwood represents a unique convergence of natural talent and training that can't be easily reproduced. The latter probably, Elle said. I had very specific advantages. Started young, had excellent mentorship, access to unlimited practice time and resources, no military bureaucracy constraining my training methods. That combination is hard to reproduce in a military training pipeline. The colonel made notes, clearly thinking about the implications. Miss Blackwood, what you've done today will be classified at the highest levels. No medals, no public recognition, no official acknowledgement. But I want you to know that your actions have prevented a catastrophic loss of American lives and a serious intelligence compromise. That matters, even if we can't publicly acknowledge it. I appreciate that, sir, but I didn't do this for recognition. I did it because people needed help, and I had the capability to provide it. That attitude is exactly why you're so valuable, Graves replied. Most operators at your skill level want recognition, want glory. You just want to do the job. That's rare. He paused, studying her carefully. There's one more thing you should know. The man you killed leading the assault, Colonel Richard Vance, we've been tracking him for 18 months. He's been the source of our intelligence leaks in this region, selling information to the highest bidder, compromising operations, getting good people killed. He's responsible for at least 3 failed missions and the deaths of 7 American service members that we know of. Elle's hands tightened on the table. So I killed a traitor. You stopped a traitor from doing more damage, yes. Elle was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked the question that had been haunting her since the previous mission. Colonel, 6 weeks ago, I was part of an extraction operation. CIA team, compromised safe house. I eliminated 17 hostiles. One of them was a teenage boy, maybe 16 or 17. I see his face every night. I need to know, was he forced? Was he innocent? Graves pulled up a file on his tablet, scrolled through it. Operation Blackbird, Yemen Safe House Extraction. Yes, I'm familiar with it. He read for a moment. The teenage fighter you're referring to was part of a forced recruitment network, run by, among others, Richard Vance. The boy's family was threatened. He had no choice. Elle closed her eyes. So I killed an innocent kid. You gave him a cleaner death than Vance would have allowed, Graves said quietly. The intel we recovered afterward showed that forced recruits who tried to escape or refused orders were tortured and executed in front of their families as examples. You ended his suffering quickly. It's not the same as innocence, but it's not murder either. Does that make it easier? No, but it should make it clearer. You're carrying the weight of those deaths because you're a good person. The day you stop carrying them is the day you become what Vance was. Elle opened her eyes, meeting Graves' steady gaze. My grandfather told me the same thing. Different words, same message. Your grandfather was a wise man. As the debriefing concluded, Brennan asked to speak with Elle privately. They walked to a small courtyard away from the bustle of the facility, where the evening air was cool and clean. So what happens now? Brennan asked. You just disappear back into whatever shadows you came from? Pretty much, Elle confirmed. I've got a flight out tomorrow. There's always another assignment waiting. This kind of work doesn't have a lot of downtime. Before you go, I wanted to give you something. He pulled out a SEAL Team Challenge coin, custom made, probably by his unit. The trident gleamed in the fading light. This is from my team. We talked about it, and we want you to have it. As a thank you, and as a reminder that you've got 12 brothers who would drop everything to help you, anytime, anywhere. Elle took the coin, feeling the weight of it, understanding what it represented. Challenge coins were sacred in military culture. Tokens of respect and belonging that couldn't be bought or faked. Receiving one from a SEAL team was an honor that few civilians ever experienced. Thank you, Chief. This means a lot. It should, because you earned it. What you did today, both battles, that's the kind of thing that creates legends. The mysterious sniper who appears from nowhere and saves entire teams. They're going to tell stories about you in the Spec Ops community for years. As long as they don't use my actual name, I can live with that. The Guardian Angel, Rodriguez said, approaching from behind. That's what we're calling you. The silent guardian who watches over operators in trouble. Has a nice ring to it. Elle smiled despite her exhaustion. Better than some nicknames I've had. The team gathered then, all 12 SEALs who'd survived the ambush. Battered and bandaged, but alive. They formed up Elle in an informal group, and Brennan spoke for all of them. Ma'am, we've been SEALs for a combined total of about 80 years. We've worked with every special operations unit in the American military and several foreign ones. We've seen the best operators in the world do impossible things. And what you did today ranks among the most impressive combat performances any of us have ever witnessed. You saved our lives, then you saved this entire facility. We don't have words adequate to thank you for that, but we want you to know you're one of us now. You might not wear the trident, but you've earned the respect that goes with it. Hoo-yah, the team said in unison, the traditional SEAL expression of affirmation. Elle felt something unexpected. Not quite pride, more like belonging. She'd always operated alone, had always preferred it that way, but standing here, surrounded by warriors who understood what she'd done and what it had cost, she felt part of something larger than herself. Hoo-yah, she replied softly, and the SEALs grinned. The medical officer insisted on examining Elle before she left. Twisted ankle wrapped and elevated, shoulder bruising documented and treated with ice. Eye drops for the bloodshot right eye. Pain medication that Elle accepted but knew she wouldn't take. She needed to stay sharp, stay alert. Pain was just information. She spent that night alone in temporary quarters, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep despite her exhaustion. 52 confirmed kills in one day. She could see all their faces when she closed her eyes, young and old, experienced in green. The machine gunner who'd been maybe 23, the spotter with the family photo, the squad leader with the graying beard, the teenage boy from 6 weeks ago whose ghost had joined the others. And Richard Vance, an American, a traitor, a man who'd once taken the same oath as her grandfather. "Grandfather," she whispered to the darkness, "did I do right? Did I stay human through this?" She thought about his lesson from that day in Wyoming, about the deer, about seeing the cost, about remembering that every trigger pull meant someone didn't go home. She'd seen all 52 as humans, forced herself to see their faces, their lives, their humanity, even while she was killing them. The weight of it was crushing, but she knew with absolute certainty that the alternative was worse. The alternative was becoming numb, becoming a weapon instead of a warrior, becoming what her grandfather had feared. She pulled out the SEAL Challenge coin, turned it over in her hands, felt the weight of brotherhood, of belonging, of purpose. "I stayed human," she said to the coin, to the memory of her grandfather, to herself. "I felt every one of those 52. I saw their faces. I'll carry them, but I don't regret protecting our people." She set the coin on the nightstand and closed her eyes. Sleep came eventually, though it brought dreams of crosshairs and falling bodies, and a teenage boy whose name she'd never know. 2 weeks later, Elle stood at her grandfather's grave in Wyoming. The ranch spread out behind her, unchanged since that day when she was 11 years old. The mountains still touched the sky. The pine trees still smelled like home. The grass was still impossibly green. She knelt and placed the SEAL Challenge coin on William Blackwood's headstone. "I stayed human, grandfather, just like you taught me. I felt every one of those 52. I saw their faces. I'll carry them with me, every single one." She placed wildflowers beside the coin, mountain asters and Indian paintbrush. "You taught me the cost. I paid it, and I'd pay it again, because protecting our people is worth the wait. You were right about everything. The day I stop feeling is the day I lose myself. So I'll keep feeling. I'll keep carrying them. And I'll keep protecting the people who need someone to stand between them and the dark." Her encrypted phone buzzed. Elle pulled it out, expecting another classified briefing notification or operational update. Instead, she found a message from Colonel Graves. "Guardian Angel, situation developing. American aid workers trapped in compound, hostile force moving in. Local government compromised. QRF unavailable due to political constraints. 12 civilians, including 4 children. You interested?" Elle stared at the message for a long moment. She thought about the last 2 weeks, the nightmares, the faces, the weight of 52 lives ended by her hand, the exhaustion that went bone deep and soul deeper. She thought about walking away, retiring, finding some quiet corner of the world where she could pretend those faces didn't follow her everywhere. But then she thought about 12 aid workers who'd gone overseas to help people, about 4 children who hadn't asked to be in danger, about the fact that she had capabilities most people didn't, and that with capability came responsibility. She thought about her grandfather's words, "A weapon follows orders. A warrior protects." She thought about Brennan's insight about staying human, about how her fear of numbness meant she still had her soul intact. She looked at the challenge coin glinting in the sunlight on her grandfather's grave, thought about the 12 SEALs who'd promised to back her up anytime, anywhere. For years, asking for help had felt like weakness, like admitting she couldn't handle it alone, like opening herself up to the pain of losing someone. But standing there in the Wyoming sunlight, looking at her grandfather's grave, she realized that was his mistake. He'd carried his 73 kills alone until the weight crushed him, until he couldn't remember his own daughter's face. She had a choice: carry it alone and lose herself, or share the burden and stay human. Brennan had offered that choice. The SEALs had offered that choice. It was time to accept it. Elle typed her response. Inbound. What's the timeline? The reply came seconds later. Situation critical. Window closing fast. Insertion available tonight if you can make it to the staging area. Elle was already walking toward her truck. Her phone buzzed again. A text from Brennan. Heard through the grapevine you might be rolling out. Word is there are kids involved. Say the word. My team's ready to back you up. Elle stopped walking, looked at the message, felt something shift inside her chest. She typed back to Brennan. 12 aid workers, 4 of them kids, trapped in a compound with hostiles closing in. I'm heading in to provide overwatch and buy time for extraction. Could use some door kickers if things get close. The response was immediate. We're wheels up in 2 hours. Send coordinates for link up. Nobody dies today, Elle. Not on our watch. Elle smiled, the first genuine smile in 2 weeks. Copy that, Chief. I'll be the one on the hillside making impossible shots. You'll be the ones doing the hard work. That's what we do. See you on target. Elle climbed into her truck, her custom rifle already packed and ready. She took one last look at her grandfather's grave, at the challenge coin gleaming in the sun. I'm not alone anymore, grandfather. You tried to teach me that lesson, but I wasn't ready to learn it. Now I am. I'll carry the weight, but I won't carry it alone. That's the difference. That's what keeps us human. She started the engine and headed for the highway. 12 aid workers, 4 children. She thought about the teenage boy from Yemen, the one forced to fight, the one she'd killed, the one whose face she'd carry forever. Maybe she couldn't save him. Maybe that weight would always be with her. But she could save these 12, these 4 children. She could make sure they went home to their families. That had to count for something. The flight and insertion went smoothly. 12 hours later, Elle and the SEAL team were in position on a ridgeline overlooking the compound. Through her scope, Elle could see the aid workers huddled in a central building. She could see the hostile forces surrounding the compound, at least 25 fighters with more arriving. Command, this is Guardian Angel. On station. I have eyes on 12 friendly civilians. Confirm 4 children. Enemy force count approximately 25 hostiles, with reinforcements inbound. Recommend immediate extraction window before enemy force grows too large. Roger, Guardian Angel. Extraction birds are 30 minutes out. Your mission is to provide overwatch and buy time. SEALs will secure the LZ and extract the civilians. How copy? Good copy, Command. Beginning target assessment. Elle settled into her firing position, made her calculations. Range to compound, 900 meters. Wind from the west. Temperature cooling with approaching dawn. Humidity high. She identified priority targets. Enemy leaders, heavy weapons, anyone positioned to threaten the extraction. Chief, I've got 25 targets mapped. When the birds come in, there's going to be noise and confusion. I'll engage anyone who threatens the extraction. Your team gets the civilians to the LZ. Copy that, Guardian Angel. SEALs are standing by. The 30 minutes stretched like hours. Elle watched the compound through her scope. Watched the aid workers trying to stay calm. Watched one of the women comforting a child who couldn't have been more than 6 years old. She thought about the teenage boy from Yemen, about how he'd been forced into a situation he didn't choose, about how she'd ended his life to save her people. These children hadn't chosen this either, but unlike that boy, they were going to survive. Elle would make sure of it. The helicopters came in fast and low, exactly on schedule. The enemy force reacted immediately, fighters grabbing weapons, moving to engage, trying to shoot down the helicopters before they could land. Elle began firing. Target 1. Enemy leader shouting orders. Down. Target 2. Fighter with RPG moving toward firing position. Down. Target 3. Machine gunner setting up to engage helicopters. Down. The SEALs moved like ghosts through the compound, reaching the aid workers, organizing them, moving them toward the landing zone. Elle kept firing. Target 4, Target 5, Target 6. Each shot was deliberate. Each shot protected her people. Each shot bought seconds that translated to lives saved. The extraction was going smoothly until one of the children broke away from the group. A little girl, maybe 7, running back toward the building. She'd forgotten something, a stuffed animal or a doll, something that mattered to a 7-year-old, even in the middle of a combat zone. An enemy fighter saw her, raised his weapon. Elle didn't hesitate. She put a round through his chest before he could fire. The fighter fell, his weapon clattering to the ground, and the little girl kept running, oblivious to how close she'd come to dying. Brennan scooped her up, ran her to the helicopter, got her aboard. Elle kept firing. Target 8, Target 9, Target 10. The helicopters lifted off, the aid workers safe inside, the SEALs providing security as they climbed into the sky and banked away from the compound. Elle watched them go, watched until they were just specks in the distance. The fighters she'd killed to save that little girl. Another face to carry, another weight on her soul. But this one felt different somehow. This one felt clean. And in that clarity, she found something unexpected. Peace, maybe, or at least acceptance. The teenage boy from Yemen, the one she'd called Ahmed in her nightmares, he'd been like that little girl, innocent, caught in circumstances beyond his control. She'd ended his suffering, even if she hadn't been able to save him from the circumstances that put him there. Maybe that was enough. Maybe carrying his face with honor, remembering his humanity, was the only redemption she could offer. She'd saved a child today. Whatever else she'd done, whatever other weights she carried, she'd saved a little girl who still had her whole life ahead of her. That had to count for something. Back at the base, Colonel Graves met them personally. All 12 aid workers safe, all 4 children unharmed, 0 American casualties. Miss Blackwood, you and Chief Cole's team just pulled off a perfect extraction against impossible odds. Just doing our job, sir, Elle said. No, Graves replied. This was exceptional work, the kind that saves lives and restores faith. Thank you. As Elle prepared to leave, Brennan caught up with her one last time. You heading out? Yeah, there's always another mission waiting. Before you go, I wanted to tell you something. My team, we're not supposed to talk about classified operations, but we're going to tell the story of the Guardian Angel. We're going to make sure every operator in the Spec Ops community knows that somewhere out there, there's a sniper who appears when things go wrong and makes impossible shots to save our people. As long as you leave my name out of it, always, but the legend that we're spreading. Because people need to know that when everything goes to hell, when all hope seems lost, sometimes an angel appears on a distant hillside and starts making the kind of shots that shouldn't be possible. Elle smiled. Take care of yourself, Chief, and your team. And if you ever need someone to make those impossible shots again, you have my number. Always will, Guardian Angel, always will. Elle walked to her truck, her rifle cleaned and packed, her next assignment already downloaded on her encrypted phone. But for the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. She had brothers now, a family, people who understood the weight she carried and the cost she paid, people who would back her up when she needed it. Elle started her truck and headed west, toward the setting sun, toward Wyoming, toward home. She'd visit her grandfather's grave again. She'd tell him about the little girl with the stuffed animal, about the 12 aid workers who got to go home, about the SEALs who'd become her brothers. She'd tell him that she'd learned his lesson, but she'd also learned to go beyond it. Staying human meant more than just seeing the cost. It meant accepting help. It meant allowing others in. It meant having people who cared whether you came home or not. The Guardian Angel still operated in shadows, still took the shots nobody else could, still carried the faces of everyone who fell. But now she knew why she did it. Not for glory, not for country, not even for honor, for the people who needed someone to stand between them and the dark, for the little girl with the stuffed animal, for the aid workers who just wanted to help, for the SEALs who'd accepted her as one of their own. Grandfather had taught her the cost. Brennan had taught her the purpose. And together those lessons made all the difference. Her phone buzzed one more time as she crossed into Wyoming. A message from an unknown number. Guardian Angel, this is Martinez. Just wanted you to know we're naming our next operation after you. Operation Guardian. Because that's what you are. Our guardian. Our angel. Thank you for everything. Elle pulled over, read the message 3 times, and felt tears sting her eyes for the first time since she was 11 years old and cried over a deer. She typed back, "Stay safe, Martinez, all of you. And remember, you're not just weapons, you're warriors. There's a difference." She put the phone away and kept driving. The mountains rose ahead of her, snow-capped and eternal. The ranch would be waiting. Her grandfather's grave would be waiting. The challenge coin would still be there, gleaming in the sun. And Elle would place fresh flowers, would tell him about the missions, would confess the weight she carried and the faces she saw and the cost she paid. But she'd also tell him about the family she'd found, about the brothers who had her back, about the little girl who got to keep her stuffed animal and her life. She'd tell him that she'd finally understood what he'd been trying to teach her all along. Staying human wasn't about suffering alone. It was about connection. It was about caring. It was about protecting the people who mattered and letting them protect you in return. The guardian angel had learned to stop being just a ghost on a hillside. She'd learned to be human again. And that was the greatest mission success of all.